So Jeff, if you're okay, we'll go ahead and get started and I'll just do a quick introduction and then turn it over to you if that works.
Sounds great.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining. And tonight it's not snowing. The last time we did this, it was in person and we had the snow coming down and it was slippery out. We still had about 13 people attend, which was wonderful, and to get their feedback. But I want to take this evening, I'll turn it over to Jeff Wood and his group, who is with CU Denver and the School of the Architect program. We got a grant from DOLA, and DOLA is paying 100% of this right now to have them really look at the options for City Hall. And I'm not going to steal their thunder. They're going to talk about the why this is important. And then, Jeff, I don't know if you want them to ask questions as we go along, or if you want to wait till the end. I know last time we had some really good conversation throughout, and then we ended with some really good conversation. But Jeff, I'll turn that over to you to decide how you want to do it. So with that, I just want to tell Jeff and his crew, the last one was a great presentation. And I think it really, the community was like, wow. And at the end, I don't want to say that this is how you will feel. But at the end, several of them walked away and they said, Denise, we really need to do something for with City Hall, for the employees and for the working environment that we have, and also for the city as a whole, to provide a better service and a better place for them to meet and gather. So with that, Jeff, I'll turn it over to you and I'll mute and you can tell us how you want us to ask questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Denise. That's really nice. I think just to answer that first question there, I think it's best if we sort of go through the whole thing and then have questions at the end, simply because that way we get through the whole thing. Sometimes questions sort of take over the process. So let us get through and then we'll kind of go from there. Thank you, Denise, and thanks to all of you for joining us today or tonight. My name is Jeffrey Wood, and I'm an architect working with the University of Colorado, Denver. The University Technical Assistance Program, which is what I'm a supervisor of, is funded by the Department of Local Affairs, and it is intended to give graduate students in architecture and landscape architecture a chance to work on real projects and serve communities. And the great thing is we wind up doing things that hopefully you'll appreciate, and gives my students a chance to present their wares and see how their designs and everything like that respond to the needs of the community. None of the designs that we're going to look at tonight are necessarily what we're going to actually build or move forward with. What we're trying to do is get feedback from you. So we're going to show a range of projects or designs, and then hopefully out of your comments and out of all the designs that we've come up with, we'll put together a hybrid that addresses most concerns. I'm not going to bury the lead too much here, but I do want to say, just so everybody can know, the biggest controversy before was whether we were going to do away with the ballroom, and none of our schemes do away with the ballroom. So I'll let everybody relax and know that right away, that the ballroom is going to be retained in some form in all the schemes that we're about to show. So I'll walk you through some of the problems of the building, and Justin, why don't you give us the next slide? Let's see, we, in our research about Manitou Springs, we were, it was interesting to find some references in Smithsonian Magazine and some quotes from that. And we just thought we'd share that we have an understanding and affinity for the town, as not necessarily as strongly held as all of you who live here, but we've come to appreciate it. And as Colorado residents, Manitou is one of our favorite places to visit for sure. Okay, Justin, you can fly through. So apparently in our last presentation, we had the date wrong when this building was built, and I apologize for that. We've corrected that. And so the building was originally built in 1897, I believe, as a well, actually, I guess it's right here, a spa and a dance hall. and has been since transformed into the women's club ballroom, which is the ballroom of choice, and then the town, the city hall or town hall. And that's enough on this slide, Justin. I'll stammer through. So I'm going to just sort of walk you real quick through the floor plan of the existing building. We have, as you guys all know, the front door here that we come in, and the ballroom is this large space here, about 4,500 square feet. Formerly, the city council chambers was here where the parking office is now. City council moved into the ballroom as a result of need for social distancing and whatnot during the COVID era. And so this is a good opportunity to reconsider how City Hall or City Council is done. I will say, having been to a meeting in the City Council chambers, it was small and underventilated, at least the night that I was there. And so we do need to find a permanent home for the City Council, and we would like to have the ballroom be a fully functional facility as well. And then we have the police department over here to this side. We'll talk about some of the problems with that. Most of the City Hall administration offices are the purple color in the back. And then the upstairs, which is small, is mostly used for storage, for evidence for the police and for servers. All right, Justin, you can fly to the next slide. So some of the things that we determined early on, working with the city, and also just kind of on our own observation, there's probably not, if this building is used, or this space is used for City Council, there's not proper exiting in the event of an emergency. And we also have a kind of thing that we're not going to solve. I'll say that we have a robust creek stream running behind us, and the building sits partially in the floodway, which is basically where the damage would occur, and then the flood zone, which is where rising waters could impact things. So the building is not going to move. We understand that. There's not an acceptable alternative location, and most people want to have City Hall where it is. And so we are, there could be a real conversation about relocating City Hall, but that is not what we're doing tonight. We're taking what we have to work with and making the best of it, and seeing how we can make it work for us. We do have some issues with the police department in terms of getting files and whatnot, privacy issues, and I think they've handled most of the evidence chain of command, which was a problem when we first started, but they've put some stuff behind properly locking doors and stuff. But even going forward, we are going to need to keep in mind that the police have very specific evidence chain of command issues that need to be dealt with. There's some pathways throughout, some circulation zones, getting people from the front door of the police station to the cells, which is problematic. The police don't have enough offices. And finally, there is not a place to bring a prisoner in and directly into the police station that doesn't involve going through a waiting room. There's some ADA compliance issues. We don't have enough bathrooms. If the whole facility was being used at the same time, we don't have enough bathrooms. And we also have a shortage of offices in the city admin area. We have the planning department is actually using a storage room and having 2 people work in there, plus all the file storage, a windowless room with 2 people and all with stacks of boxes. So the City Hall has been added on to, or reworked several times to kind of accommodate growth and everything like that. But now it's time to step back, have a look at the whole building. We are kind of landlocked. We can't really move or expand the building out in any direction, except for maybe possibly moving upstairs. So the floor plan is what the floor plan is. We have to work within that envelope. Justin, you can go to the next slide. Am I talking here or are you talking?
Nope, I think this is where I'll speak for just a little bit.
Thank you.
So the next slides, we're just going to try to identify and speak more to the points that Jeff brought up of the specific type of issues that the building is currently faced with. So this slide is looking at the means of escaping or egress out of the city council chambers room. The left diagram there is describing what the chambers used to be, where there was one main entrance into that space and then one possible exit from that space. So, the issue there is one, you really only have one potential exit if there's a issue with someone coming through those main doors as a violent behavior. You're having everyone leave one space. And then the second issue is that the city council members or people that are at the dais don't also have a great way to get to that exit even. So in our relocating or thinking about the chambers room, and actually a lot of the different spaces of the building, we're making sure that we pay attention to exiting, to egress, so that there's escapable routes in case of emergencies, fire, or violence. And then specifically for the chambers room, looking at putting doors or exits on the backside near where people are sitting, which you can see on that left image with the blue, where people can exit behind the dais. In this here's the existing floor plan again, showing that the issue basically of a lot of the exiting of the space. So I talked a lot about the city council chambers, but in general, there's a lot of conflicts where there isn't really great exiting in spaces. I mean, if we look at the police department as a whole, we also see that that space doesn't really have a second means of exiting for that entire department. So again, the plans that the team has worked on is we're trying to maintain that notion of safety through exiting of the building. These next slides, looking at different topic. This one is looking at the circulation of people moving into the police department specifically. So we brought this up because there's an issue with the overlap of interactions between detained people through the police service running into or sharing space with people that are not involved in that kind of activity or experience. So that red line shows if you're a detained person, you're going into the waiting room, and that the police would have to move that person through the building into the cells, so they have to navigate through the department. The blue here shows if you're police and staff and you're working in that department, you also access that same waiting room and that same kind of movement through the building. But also people, the public and the community have to work with that waiting room on the side of the building. So if you're paying your parking ticket as of now, you're entering that left waiting room. And again, having issues where you may be encountering people that are going through a booking process. And again, if you're coming to visit just the police as a community member, again, interfacing with that waiting room. So, the plans that we'll see at the end, we do try to address how the police department operates in terms of its booking process, and really try to separate the circulation or movement of detained folks and what that process is, and separate that away from the public and any other kind of movement through the department. A kind of related topic is the records and evidence security. So as of now, on the second floor, which is what this image is showing, we have the evidence room that's up here for the police department, their main evidence room, and there's also some space for city records and archives. So, as of now, that evidence room is secured with a locking door. But, we've highlighted that there's an issue that space is still accessible, or at least is around folks that might work in the server room, or that might go to the city records, or even the public in general do have access to that stairwell. So trying to make sure in these new floor plans that the evidence for the police is really secure for its own privacy, security, and function for the police department. So, and then on the topic of more records specifically for City Hall, back on the first floor, we have two main spots where a lot of the files are being held for archives and basically vaults. So the floor plan on the right there, we have the smaller red space on the bottom right. That is a vault room right now. It's non-combustible wall assemblies, which is great. There are some issues with the door being able to lock, so that needs some basic maintenance. But also in general, it's a small space that really just serves a certain amount of operation. Some other records, as Jeff mentioned in the beginning, is at the left red, that circle that's kind of near the top left. And that space, you know, is very difficult because that's basically what the planning department is using for its operations. So currently there's two personnel working in that space. There's a lot of files again, and also machines for office work. So that's all crammed in that one space. So again, in the plans, we'll see what we try to do is make sure that there's enough allocation of storage for the different departments, that planning department has an adequate amount of space and interface with the public, and that we create a designated vault for City Hall where records can be kept and are safe from fire, from floods, and that can be lockable in its own space. And again, these are basically the solutions that we're looking at for that vault space, is to make sure that it's just located in a prime spot for access and that we're protecting valuable records for the city. So these next slides, I think Taylor will talk about.
Yeah, hey guys. So one of the other things that we found about the building is related to stairs and elevator. So according to ADA compliance, a workplace should have 2 exit routes to promote prompt evacuation of employees and other building occupants during emergency. Right now, your building has a set of stairs and no elevator. So I mean, 1 set of stairs and no elevator. So that's something that we looked into as well. There's kind of these uncompliances. Justin, go ahead and switch. Another thing is the current restroom situation. So the way that the code works is that it's based on full capacity for everything that's going on in the building. So the way that it's looked at is if there was a night where the ballroom was at full capacity and the chambers were, and all of the employees were there in the police station otherwise. And so that's what the number of bathrooms is based on. And for what you guys have right now, it's just not enough. So we looked into that as well.
Taylor,
Justin, go ahead. Yeah.
Taylor, may I interrupt? Somebody is not on mute, and so we're getting some feedback. So everyone that's on, if you don't mind muting your, making sure that you're muted, that would be great. Go ahead.
So yeah, as I was saying, just the way that we decide how the number of bathrooms that you need is based on full capacity. So just reiterate in case you guys didn't hear me, if the ballroom is full and the chambers is full at the exact same time that all the employees are working, and including the police station, the amount of bathrooms that are in the building currently are not enough. Justin, go ahead. So now we're going to switch into kind of a different mode. So we're putting this here because it'll make sense when we show you guys our plans. But this is just an example of what a sally port is. So a sally port is a garage where police and sheriff vehicles would unload inmates at the jail. So right now there's an issue where the inmates will sit in the vehicle outside of the jail, and that's not necessarily the most secure thing. So after the vehicle pulls in, the door is closed, and that creates a secure environment for those in custody and those around as well. Justin, go ahead. So really quick, 4 possible Sallyport locations. There's a west side placement, and the pros with this placement is that it's out of sight, and there would be you would not need to move you would not need to move the police department. The con about this is that because the fire department is right there, and there's a set of stairs there too, we don't know if there's going to be enough room. Also, it would not be a fully functioning Sallyport. So it'd be something where you could pull in, but not drive through. This middle one right here is a south side placement. So the pros of this is we're not moving we're not moving the police station. The cons of this, however, is that this is very visible to anybody coming. So it would kind of change the look of the building, which is something that we want to avoid. And also, it would not be a fully functioning Sallyport. It would be another situation where you could pull in but not drive through. This last diagram here would be an east side placement, and this is something that we explored. There's to move the police department completely. The pros, though, would be that it would be a fully functioning Sallyport. You would be able to drive through it. There's enough space for it. It wouldn't necessarily be something that would change the look and the feel and the history of the building. And guys that later, so just keep this in mind.
Okay.
Justin, can I just interrupt for 1 second? I just want to go through, just circle back on a couple of points that we've made. No, you don't have to go back. There's a couple of terms I wanted to define. When we talk about problems with the building, like the exiting for the city council people, that room is also used as a courtroom, and both a judge or city council people are supposed to have a path of egress in the event of an emergency. That is it's not a building code issue. It's called best practices. It's just something, it's become part of the normal way of looking at buildings now. Unfortunately, we have people that have bad intent that come through the front door, and giving people a way to flee is now becoming just normal. And certainly for a courtroom as well. So it makes sense where the ballroom the courtroom and the city council chambers are the same room. We want to try to deal with that together. So that's not a code issue. It's called best practices. Now, as far as ADA compliance and having service to the upstairs space, we generally have elevators, because if somebody was in a wheelchair or something like that, they should be able to use the entire building. There's some limits to that in terms of the code. There is, if it's an onerous thing to do, you can sometimes get a waiver from that kind of stuff. But in general, a 2-story building should have some way to get to the second story for everybody. So anyway, I just wanted to point out there's a difference between building code, ADA compliance, and best practices. And I will yield the floor back to you, Justin.
All right. Okay, so the next slides, we're talking about the team. We took inventory of basically the different departments and spaces involved in the building. I think the Manitou City Hall building is quite complex in the sense that there's a lot of different departments and overlap of needs and conflicting senses of needs. So we did spend a fair amount of energy, just really making sure that we have the correct inventory of what the spaces are. And throughout the process, we did speak to a lot of the staff of the building to get a sense of what was things that were working and that way we know to hold on to, and then the things that were not working on the staff level, and that became information and design motives to move forward with. So these next slides just kind of show a little bit of that inventory process and some of the takeaways we've gotten through talking with staff. So here's just a basic overview of the building and some of the big breakdowns. I think a main takeaway really probably is understand that the ballroom, and this is shown the ballroom and chambers as separate in terms of function, but it is just one space. So the ballroom space as its wholeness would be about a 40% of the building square footage. So it's that's, you know, I think a big picture of how the building operates. Another, you know, takeaway I think from some of these numbers and graphs is that the private office, the little donut in the center, shows kind of how it breaks down per room type. Is that the private offices, we have less than 10% of the building is used for private offices, which I think is probably telling and does support a lot of the discussions we've had where there doesn't seem to be quite enough intimate space for people to operate well. So moving into it, and I'll try to be, you know, pretty quick, and we can return to these charts later if that seems productive. But these just break down per department. So we have the administration part of City Hall. You know, we have issues in the floor plan where there's multiple offices, but you know, office 4 is actually in the way of office 1, and one has to walk through office 4 to even get to some of the corner office, right? So even there, it's probably not even fair to say there's 4 private offices in the scheme. So, you know, and going through this, we discovered that, you know, keeping an open office, you know, for a lot of departments was helpful. But looking at private offices, seeing how many folks are in the department and may need to operate in a private setting. So trying to include those numbers and hit marks, as well if we're administration to make sure we increase that storage capacity. So city clerk down on the bottom, you know, we have you know, there's a partition wall, but it's basically one large open space. So in talking with the operations, you know, there's seems to be about 3 personnel that could use that space. Right now, it's more 2 because that's the limitation of it. So looking at, you know, adding a private office into that department, and also maintaining that open office for the other 2 personnel. Planning was a really big driver for some of the new layouts. As discussed earlier, is planning is in a room with no daylighting. It's a shared space, and it's also shared with storage and office supplies. So really a really cramped space that we recognize was a really struggle for staff to work in there. So this was something that we made sure in the new versions over the new schemes that we explored to make sure that we had appropriate amount of private offices, enough open office that's reasonable, and to make sure that all of this actually engages with the public, since people would be coming into the planning department to talk about plans or any kind of building questions. So also relocating that department closer to the lobby space. You know, finance we found was operating pretty well. So, you know, part of this process was also to not touch or mess with what was working. So, you know, finance in many ways was doing well. So we wanted to preserve their function. Parking now is moved into what used to be the chambers room. Square footage wise, it seemed appropriate because I do have a lot of equipment and whatnot. But again, similar story to some of the other departments, as we want to make sure we have private offices, at least a private office for this department, and get some of that storage in a designated space. And again, make sure that there's an interaction with the public and a front desk area. And then lastly, for the department inventory process, we looked at the police department, you know, one of the more complicated departments. As mentioned earlier, there's issues with egress and movement, but also issues with the booking process and how people navigate through the space, and then also like evidence and storage. So all those things where we use to try to come up with different strategies to support the police department and be in a better functioning system. So you'll see that we try to introduce a few more new offices, try to preserve an open office for certain functions, and again, really rearrange things so that a booking sequence is going to better serve the police department as well as the safety of the public. So I think in all of this, you know, the big picture that we were working with is that there are needs on a departmental level of square footage and changes. So that, again, it includes the private offices and the storage I've been talking about. What I didn't, show specifically graphically is we need, what we should, talked about earlier, is that there's needs for restrooms, there's need for stairwells, elevators, and also conference rooms, places where different departments can meet and talk and have flex space. So there's a general building need for a better use of all the departments. And then the chambers room in itself also needs to find a home, right? So right now it's in the ballroom. There's some niceness probably to that. There's a lot of space. So, but it does need its own home. And also, as Jeff mentioned, there's some multiple operations occurring in that space. So make sure that we also think about that. So all this, I think, leads to the idea that we need to either reallocate square footage and accommodate these needs, or we need to create that square footage somehow. So here's a chart that more specifically try to calculate some of the square footage that we would like to aim towards. So in some ways this is rough, but this is through some interviews and whatnot. And we found that, through this, about 3,800 square feet would be a good mark to hit that would suffice for all the department needs. So that became kind of how we became curious of how to accomplish and solve all these problems. So the team broke this down to 3 different main strategies as a way to either reallocate that square footage or to create that new square footage. And in each of these strategies, we have a few different plans that we can talk about. The first strategy is that we will reallocate or take space from mostly the ballroom. I think in all of these, we want to preserve the ballroom, for its historic nature, for what it means to the community. Seeing that early image of Manitou's City Hall as that beautiful old historic building, I think inspired all of us. So, so all of these, we try to respect the kind of grand, important nature of the ballroom. So that first one, though, is looking at, is there ways to change the ballroom so we can gain some more square footage? Can we use flex walls, right, to kind of make a more flexible space for the ballroom? The second strategy is we explored expanding the second floor of the building. So right now there's a second floor that has a few operating spaces, and then a lot of it is an attic space. So this was a thought of, if we were able to change that roof line, add some conditioned square footage space, that we might have enough space to do all these needs. So in that second version, you'll see that we move the ballroom up to that second floor, and then try to figure out what would that mean for the first floor. And then the last strategy is preserving the ballroom basically as is on that first floor, expanding the second floor, but that expansion on the second then will serve specifically offices and city hall functioning. And that was a measure that, the advantage there is you preserve the ballroom. So we have versions of all these, which we can go into. So this one is part of that first strategy, where we're not expanding the second floor, but we are carving into some of the ballroom space as a way to find more square footage. So this mostly is carving into that ballroom and adding a chambers space into it. So in some ways comparable to probably how the space is operating now, where a portion of the ballroom is for chambers. The wall in between ballroom and chambers, it could be a partition or some kind of flexible wall or soft wall that could move. But I think the rest of this plan is fairly minimal, right? Trying to be a little bit softer about the changes that would occur. So some improvements to the police department, adding a booking room, an interview room, adding a few more offices for City Hall. But this one is probably the most conservative, where it's actually probably falling behind a little bit in some of the goals mentioned. But we wanted to have one at least that was on the more minimal side. The second one, same strategy, but the big kind of difference from the first one is this one would look at taking the left side of the ballroom as it is now, make that into the chambers, which again is, this one's actually very comparable in some ways to how the building's operating now. and then get the ballroom to fill out to the rest of the right side of itself. Potentially move that kitchen to the north side so that we still get a nice rectangular space for the ballroom. And again, there's some changes into the police department. Both this one and the last one put the Sally Port on that left side that Taylor was talking about. So this one operates with that notion of changing how the booking process could work. This one has a little bit more offices for the administration, as we bought a little bit more from the ballroom in this scheme.
Great. I think I'll talk about the next plan configuration. I'm Jake, everybody. So you'll see in this configuration, we try to keep the ballroom on the first floor while giving more office space to the chambers room as well as other offices. This plan also expands the police department space while increasing safety for the department and for City Hall in general. It also gives more office space to each department, especially to City Hall offices. The overall layout of this plan utilizes large central corridors, as you can see, and creates accessible offices and sort of more intuitive organization. The main idea behind this plan is to maintain as much ballroom space as possible while creating a flexible council chambers that can be converted into a larger ballroom space, or vice versa if a larger council space is needed. Go ahead, Justin.
Okay, so those first three were for that strategy one where we're not expanding the second floor. The rest of these, we are looking at a second floor expansion. So this is the first plan of strategy two, where we're expanding the second floor, but we're placing the ballroom on the second floor. And I think the idea of moving that ballroom upstairs is to maintain, its importance, and in some ways, maybe this could make the ballroom even more grand by being elevated, overlooking the stream on the north side, adding maybe a deck out there overlooking it. So I think in some ways a ballroom in these next two schemes could be, the idea is that the ballroom would be impressive. So on the first floor, this one, because we've expanded square footage, can really bring in the square footage all the departments need. So as was talking about earlier, is this one expands the city clerk department, parking, planning office. Those all face into the entryway, so the public would have access to all three of those departments, plus finance, which is the gray in the bottom right hand corner, that the public could interface with all four of those departments. The chambers is set kind of in the core of the building with a conference room on its south side that can serve as an exiting strategy for the chambers, but also a conference room for court functions or flex conference experiences. City Hall has a pretty open office at the front, a sizable vault, much more private offices and a conference room as well for the department. And then the police department has been expanded to include a few more private offices. But in this one, we've moved the Sally Port to the front of the building. That was Taylor's version 2 idea. So then that sequence of booking and interview is shifted to accommodate that kind of flow. And then on the second floor, we have the ballroom where the stairs and elevator are right off that main lobby. You have your own entry for the ballroom with a coat check, kitchen, bathrooms up there to serve the ballroom. Square footage, it's about the same as it is now, but you have the quote room and the entry space. That's new additions and bathrooms for the ballroom. And then we've maintained some of the kind of storage operations on the existing second floor on that left-hand side of the plan.
Great. I'll talk about this one as well. This one also plans on expanding the ballroom space onto that second floor, as well as a lot more additional storage space. So it expands all of the department's office spaces on the first floor by lifting that ballroom up onto the second floor. And it lays out the offices in an organized fashion, again, around a central corridor and stair. Placing the ballroom on the proposed second floor not only makes more room for office space on the first floor, but it also allows for a ballroom that is more separate from the day-to-day of City Hall. And I think this separation gives the ballroom more versatility as well as a little more privacy. This plan is definitely a little more ambitious, but it offers a really beautiful expansion of this historic building. Go ahead, Justin.
Okay, so I will be introducing this one. So this plan was really focused on the police department and fixing the egress, circulation, evidence, and storage issues. It also shows how it could work if we place a sally port on the side that best suits it. So the plan still includes key features like public access for parking, planning, and finance. The plan starts with communications for the police, and the sally port kind of creates the security for booking. So as you walk through the sally port, you see the 3 cells and interrogation room, and then a temporary evidence lockers that lead into permanent evidence storage. Thank you. And then there are some private offices, and then we've got bathrooms for the male and female officers and locker rooms. And then at the very top, you'll see it's a patrol room, but it's shared space. So it's an open floor plan patrol room. And then we've got our chambers. Thank you. We've got our chambers, which include a bathroom in this plan, sizable vault and then we'll move to the purple, which is City Hall. So it was an important thing for this plan to have all City Hall offices include windows, so have access to natural sunlight. And then there's mechanical rooms, and then we've moved the public restrooms to the other side. And then if we go up the stairs, this is where the new memorial hall would be. And it's complete with the things like a kitchenette, a bathroom. And then I've left in this plan, it leaves the original upstairs basically the same, but we've expanded storage. So I guess the server room remains the same. That's it. So yeah, that's this plan. Justin, you can move on.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Graham and I'll be walking you through the final plan for tonight. Not final as in finalized or anything, these are purely conceptual, but this is the last one that you guys will have to look at and hear about. So, all right. So if you are an everyday person, you would be entering through into the lobby just as that experience currently is. And in this lobby, you would have access to the 4 different departments, the planning, parking, city clerk, and finance office. From there, you would then reach this main circulation hallway, which connects to the ballroom. And the ballroom is bookended by the council chambers, as well as a catered kitchen area. And so as far as the council chambers goes, this has the proper best practices exiting, whether it's a city hall meeting or city court happening. And then one thing that this plan does that's a bit unique is it takes this part of it and creates that as the sally port. So it's a one-directional sally port, so you'd be backing in, but what that allows is an entirely isolated detainee experience from the rest of the building. Yeah, and again, communications is just beyond that with some really nice natural light. All the offices have access to windows and natural light. You can go on to the second floor, Justin. So as you're going up to the second floor, you'll see that all of City Hall administration is located up here. And there's this big open space, and that's actually the ballroom still. So the ballroom in this plan is a double height space with a potential for clerestory lighting to really make that a grand ballroom space compared to the acoustic tile ceiling that it is currently. Yeah, and so again, we have City Hall admin with plenty of offices. Each office has windows into open areas and even into the ballroom, if that's desirable. Because we are introducing an elevator into the building, there's opportunity for second floor vault storage for records from City Hall. And then there's also, because of the way the cells are on the first floor, shared water walls such that on the second floor you can have employee restrooms and locker rooms and even showers if someone decides it's a nice day and wants to ride their bike in to work, as well as a nice open lit break room.
Okay, well, I think that's all the floor plans we had for tonight.
Very good, guys. I'll just throw it open to anybody who would. I have no idea the best way to do this on Zoom. If you have, let's see, I'll check the chats. If you have a question or would like to have the floor and ask a question, send me a chat, or I guess unmute yourself, and hopefully not everybody does that at one time. Anybody have any questions or comments?
I'll ask a question. If the ballroom is on the second floor, will they have any access to natural light like they do on the first floor?
That's a great question. Our thought is that certainly on the back side of the building, there would be open up to the stream area, and on the side, I'm trying to think which side. I guess that's the east.
North.
Yeah. Okay. That's
The
fine.
creek.
Yeah. There's gonna be light here and light here. We're thinking that we would not add a lot of windows up here just because that is going to materially change the look of the building. Although I'm going to be honest with you, I think if we match the windows and particularly in the old historic manner, we could probably make that look nice as well. But for now, our intent is to have most of the light out facing the stream side.
And my second question is, on a couple of them, it looked like from the ballroom or the council chambers on the first floor, the doors exited into the creek. So is there a overhang that you're planning, or?
I think we were going to have some sort of balcony out there. I'm sorry that that's not shown. We were thinking it might be nice to have a balcony out there anyway, just for employees and whatnot, but certainly an exit balcony. Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, the first step is kind of a doozy, but after that, it's all downhill. You just can't, there's going to be a series of rafts waiting for you. Yeah, that's kind of what we had in mind. So a narrow balcony that could be developed on that side. Did that answer your question?
I'm sorry, yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to add? Any question?
I'm Steve Snyder. Am I coming in? I was late, had a good dinner. My interests are being able to take advantage of heating, cooling, lighting, the general energy efficiency measures. And for one, and I don't know if that's what's addressed, but I apologize if it has. And the other issues are actually maybe opportunity, is that maybe we could look into having a building that will be the ability to continue to operate with photovoltaic systems, but off grid in case of if the grid is down, for long periods of time, and of course, especially in the police department area. So I don't know if that has been looked at or addressed, and I apologize because I just said, oh, I'm supposed to, I want to see what's going on here. But I put together like a lighting standards for foot candles, for hallways and office areas, and then are we doing compact fluorescent lighting, and do we have opportunities to help out with the federal dark skies initiative, and on and on. So have these opportunities been addressed, or even are they possible? And this is a big question, and I hope I'm not butting in and we're wasting everybody's time. But
Well, let me just
go ahead.
Well, let me just respond in general. I mean, right now we're really just looking at layouts of buildings, but I will say that the funder, I mean, if this project was to be funded in part by the Department of Local Affairs or DOLA, one of their critical items is sustainability, and so things like energy use and that sort of thing would definitely be incorporated in the final design. As far as off the grid per se, there would be emergency generators since it's a police station and whatnot. It would have to have something like that. But I think and I assume you really are just talking about electrical use as a building that's serving the city. I'm not sure it could actually be off the grid. We would have to have, phone and internet and all that kind of stuff. It would have to be well connected to the rest of the world. But I think energy wise, we want to do that. I think there's a little bit of a challenge in Manitou Springs because we're sort of in a bit of a canyon, and so and there's trees and whatnot. And so sometimes solar energy is harder to manipulate. We would always look at that. We were always looking to see if our roofs will accommodate solar panels and whatnot. But that comes later on after we've sort of found a floor plan we're going to develop.
Yeah, I've lived here for over 30 years. Yeah, and I know the solar access from that building is questionable. So, but I was just looking at a number of. I've been involved in retired federal service 30 years, and I've done energy management for the majority of it. I worked at Fort Carson, and they're recognized as having a very excellent program. So I'll be hopefully dialing in and paying attention to what we're doing here. And you answered the one question is, why am I just seeing the layout? Because you haven't got to these other issues. So thank you for.
Okay. I was going to answer a chat we got from Ann. Ann, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher your name. Bilski? Anyway. You asked about the time. You said depending upon which plan is selected, would the time frame for the remodeling be somewhat similar for each plan? I think that's a great question. I'll be honest with you. I think all the plans that involve a second story would take longer than the ones that are done at the lower level. I think the very first scheme that we showed, which was, I believe, that Justin was speaking about, we deliberately kind of went after that one to look at what the most, what is the word? The most gentle hand on the, so this would be probably the quickest in terms of phasing and whatnot. But I will say all of the plans have their advantages and disadvantages in terms of phasing and moving one department out while we do something else. So I would say in general, you're probably talking anywhere from 6 to 18 months, depending on the scale of the project. With the upstairs buildings being, or the upstairs designs being more invasive and more time consuming. So anybody else have a question? Wow. All right.
This is a quiet group. Anybody thoughts, or is there one that you liked over another one, or comments about something that you liked or didn't like? Because all that feedback is important for them as they continue to look at these. So is there one that you thought was the best one, or you really didn't like this one, or what? Any thoughts? Anybody?
I will say that we probably stole the thunder a little bit, Denise, when I said that we weren't going to touch the ballroom, because if you recall the last meeting, everybody was there to defend the ballroom and was up in arms that we were going to take the ballroom out. So I probably diminished the enthusiasm for argument and discussion.
But that does beg the question of what would in the different designs, how would the capacity of the ballroom change?
Well, hey, Justin, would you go back to your scheme first? I want to sort of say something. When
The first one?
yeah, the first one. Yeah, the very first. I think in general, where we have the city council chambers and the ballroom next to each other, it's sort of implied that we might develop this wall between the two as what we call a soft wall, meaning they could actually merge. And so in that case, the ballroom is not changed at all. I think in all the schemes where we move the ballroom upstairs, the ballroom is actually larger than it is now. And then there's probably a couple of schemes where the ballroom has been impacted because we've stolen space. I would say I don't have the number ready, but I'm going to just go out on a limb and say the most drastic reduction in ballroom size would be to be 75% of its present configuration. So we understand the importance of the ballroom, and we also are just trying to, it's really because it's the biggest room in the building, it's the easiest one to steal from. So.
Oh, can I ask you something about that?
Sure.
Did you mean that the ballroom would be 75% of its current size, or that the 75% reduction?
75% of its current size. That's a,
Okay.
if you look at this particular scheme that's on the screen now, even though it doesn't happen very much, we tried to design this building so that you could have an event here on the same night that the city council chambers is being used. Now, again, it may not ever happen, but we tried to look at it as if it would. So in that case, on that particular night, because this wall would be closed up, the ballroom would be smaller. Now, obviously, if we didn't have something going on in city council chambers, if that wall was slid out of the way, then the ballroom would be the same as its regular size. It works the other way as well, because if there was a controversial city council meeting where there's a lot of people that showed up in excess of the capacity of the city council chambers, suddenly we could have a big city council meeting that would spill over into the ballroom. So having them right next to each other is not the worst thing in the world in terms of sharing space.
Oh, can I ask you a follow-up on that?
Sure,
May I?
100%.
So when you're in city council chambers, it used to be pretty noisy when you'd hear people in the hall talking. Sometimes we'd have to say, oh, please talk quieter or go outside or something. And if this is just a soft wall and there's an event in the ballroom, how is there some kind of soundproofing thing you can do with a soft wall so that?
Well,
yeah.
Let me just change the term. Okay, so the soft wall is not like a curtain. It would be a collapsible wall, which would be basically partitions that sort of fold. It is, as you're suggesting, less soundproof than a traditional constructed wall would be, but they are designed to actually restrict sound, because that is always an issue when you divide up rooms like that. And in general, with regard to the city council chamber, at least regarding from the hallway, we do have this sort of anteroom here so that hopefully that acts as a sound buffer for at least stuff going on in the lobby. But I want to say specifically, Julie, that you were 100% right. A collapsible or movable wall is less soundproof than a traditional wall. And certainly if you're the person that's scheduling events, you probably would not want to schedule an event in the ballroom that involved a band to go concurrent with
Right.
a city. I mean that's
Right.
whoever's doing that kind of planning would necessarily have to have an incredibly, first of all, I don't think it's going to happen that often, and if it did, they'd have to have a pretty good understanding of the use that's going on in the ballroom. So
And then when you did open up city council for ballroom use, people would just be hanging out by the dais to put their drinks on there or something?
they'd probably, honestly, we would have to probably put the dais here. We'd have to slide it around and have the seating go back this way.
Oh, and then have some kind of other wall, some other removable wall to separate the dais from the rest?
No, not necessarily, no.
Oh, the dais would still be there. It's just part of your, like if you're getting married, then the
Well-
dais is back there in the ballroom. I mean,
Oh, I see, if you're doing it that way.
yeah. I mean, if your idea is that we can use city council chambers as part of the ballroom, I can see how maybe that would work if you're talking about overflow seating, which is sort of hard to imagine that many people, but I'm thinking more of like events and stuff. And that's
Sure.
kind of a weird, thing to see when you're having a party. I've rented the ballroom myself for, various events over the years. And so, but we never had like a dais in the room. That would be weird.
No, it's a fair question. I think probably, again, it would be incumbent somewhat on the city to decide. I mean, you'd have to break down all the chairs, yes, and the dais. They'd have to have,
I don't know if you heard.
we probably are going to need more storage than we've shown, really honestly, but
Not there yet.
that would, you would, in order to really make it happen, you would vacate this room in terms of the city council furnishing. All that stuff would have to be out because you'd probably put tables and chairs in that to really make it work. So,
I guess my reaction off the top of my head without really much more information is it doesn't sound very practical to bother to do all that work with the wall being such that you can have the ballroom flow into city council chambers, because I don't know, at least in terms of events, I wouldn't want to have like a dais in there, and it seems like a heck of a lot of work. I mean, the dais, I guess you could create a movable dais, but my God, then where are you going to put it? So I don't know. I'm not sure if that makes a lot of sense to me. Also, the other consideration is that we don't know what's going to be happening with the new quote unquote ballroom that will be right across the street there down a half a block at Hiawatha. And so if that has been talked about as an option, so that may also be a reason why we shouldn't be too terribly concerned about minimizing the size of this ballroom. It's just an idea.
Thank you, Julie. I was just about to say the same thing.
in general, though, because nothing is really cast in stone yet, we proceeded as if nothing else is happening anywhere else in town. We're trying to keep the constituents happy that use the ballroom in City Hall. And if there's another ballroom that does get approved and built down the street, then maybe that informs our decisions going forward. But right now, we're just considering what we have to do to keep the residents of Manitou Springs happy and involved with the City Hall that we have now.
Thank you.
There was another question here. Hang on a second. And Ann, you've asked another great question. I always ask, okay, the city has limited ability to expand, but services and resources that benefit the community continue to be enhanced. Would the remodel still be functional at least 20 or more years from now? Anne was not a plant, I don't believe, but she's asked a question that I almost always start our conversations with, and that is you want to look, you want to design the city hall you need in 25 to 40 years, or really any building that we're going to do needs to be functional, have a lifespan of 25 to 40 years. And so I don't think anybody can really predict all the changes that are going to happen over that time, but I think we have asked our stakeholders in the City Hall administration, Denise and her fellow city employees, what they foresee their needs are going to be. And we've tried to anticipate all that. And so I would never want to bet that we've hit everything out of the park, but I think we've really talked about that and tried to make that a consideration. So.
Jeff, I'll just expand on that. We talked a lot about, does staffing grow, does it not? And we don't see that staffing is going to be a lot of growth at this point. We don't, of course, we never know that, but where the staffing levels that we are now, unless if there's much more services providing and that's something that's requested, I don't see there being a huge amount of staffing growth over the next 10, 20 years. But that could change. You never know. The other thing I just wanted to mention is, Steve, I know you talked about energy efficiency, and I have to get these numbers for sure, but my understanding is this is the least efficient building that the city owns. For those of you that sit during a city council meeting, you know that you turn off the heater and you're cold in very short time, and during the summer it's hot. But this is the #1 building that we use for electricity, etc. So from an efficiency perspective, the windows and all aspects of it is very inefficient at this time.
I'm happy that you realize that, and I'm not. So every time I go into the city hall for the council meetings, and you have all the lights on, and you have the blocking the passive solar gain and daylighting, and inability to turn off one bank of lights and not the other, and so but yeah, and I'm not surprised that we're addressing it, but I wasn't doing anything else tonight, so I thought I'd see what's going on, and thank you. Am I supposed to talk some more?
No.
No. Any other comments or any other thoughts? We didn't really get a sense of, do you like one over another? What are your feedback just on the layouts, and what are your thoughts in that manner?
I believe if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to put Alex on the spot here. We have an email address that if there's any comments that you'd like to make after some consideration. We're going to do two things. This presentation is I think it's already on the city website. We are going to also put a recorded version of this this meeting tonight up somehow, link it onto the city's website so you can rewatch the stuff or look at all the plans we've laid out. And what we would really like to do is, if you have some thoughts after you've thought about it for a while and like to share them with us, go ahead and send it to us so we have some record of your concerns or ideas or things you like. So Alex, do we know what that email address is?
Yeah, I was going to say, Alex, can you put it in the chat?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say, Denise. So I'll put it in the chat, and everyone can see it there. We also have a dedicated web page for this. I'll link it in the chat too.
And since Anne just raised this question about the second story, Justin, I'm going to put you on the spot and have you go to slide number 3, I believe, the one with the old style building. Because Anne was saying that she thought that the building could be transformed in a good way. I look at these windows, the old true divided light windows, and I'm imagining if we did put a second story somehow up there and brought back that kind of window style and had it up there, and and I'm just sketching this without really thinking about architecture right now. I just want to point that out. It could be really dramatic, make a really nice ballroom that would would be great to drive by there at night and see people in there using it and have it lit up and stuff like that. I've never felt like the fact that just because it's an historic building, that doesn't necessarily mean we can't even make it larger and even grander. So, I do understand that there are limits to what we can and can't do historically. A lot of it has to do with what kind of funding you've got in the past from the historic commissions, in terms of what strings they control over stuff. But the new approach to historic preservation, as we're changing in this country, is instead of putting buildings in mothballs, we're trying to give them additional lifespan. That's the most sustainable energy wise and resource wise. And oftentimes it gives a building another, if we can add onto the building and make it useful for 50 years, that's an even better honor to the building. In my opinion, I'm not the one making the decision, but if we are called upon to convince a historic commission, I can make a compelling series of arguments to let them know that we are thinking about the good of the building. We're not going to just slap up a modern addition on top of a traditional building like this.
And Nancy asked if all that would have to go through HPC, and of course, anything that goes to the outside has to go to HPC.
Right.
So that is everything would have to go through if we were to do a second, if the community and council wanted it to go to a second building, all of that would have to go through HPC guidelines, et cetera. Nancy, you asked for the implications. What do you mean by that? Just so that I'm not sure I understand. You say, any chance you could put the implications of each design?
Yeah, just because I couldn't really read on my computer. The slides were too small. So as the folks were going through each of the designs, they told, I don't want to say pros and cons, but the implications of the differences between each and kind of what's positive. Well, I didn't want to say pros and cons, but anyway,
Yeah.
Just kind of the narrative that they gave, if they could include some of that in the when they post it.
I'll say this though, yeah, and I think that's fine. I think we should, but I will say if you if you move the ballroom upstairs, there is the opportunity to make the ballroom, have a more modern and functional, like a catering kitchen. You can do upgrades to that area and make the ballroom, better light, better sound, all that kind of stuff. So I think the ballroom, if it's going to be an integral part of the design, it does give you the opportunity to make a grander ballroom, if that's the right way to put it. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. When you're talking about putting the ballroom upstairs, I'm hearing a couple different things. Clarify. Are you talking about raising the roof or putting it into the existing space up there?
Raising the roof for sure.
Thanks.
Raising the roof for sure. There's not enough room between the floor structure and the bottom of the roof structure to make a credible room up there. Now, there are some second story additions where we put the admin office building or the office space upstairs. And while we're raising the roof to hold that, we also, if we went to Graham's at the end, that would probably fine, Justin. There's the opportunity to make the ballroom a two-story space. So that would be open so that, if our second story area would then allow light to come in, like a lantern on three sides anyway, and have that ballroom have a grand two-story space, which would make it an even better building or a better room that way as well. So right now, what we're trying to do is just get some direction from you folks and the city, and then, you know, we will toil with the Historic Preservation Council and see how see what their concerns are going to be, and how supportive or how in opposition they would be to adding a second story. As long as it was done sensitively, I really have no doubt that they would be supportive of it. And, you know, not obviously, a second story addition will cost more than keeping everything on the lower level. But if we keep everything on the lower level, the ballroom will have to give up some of its space, because we need to pick up quite a bit of space in order to make the building work. So that's the trade-off.
Jeff, this one that you have right here is probably would not cost near as much, right? Because this is not, you're basically you're just changing what's upstairs, but you're not enhancing much space upstairs. Is that correct?
Right. Well,
Yeah.
we're adding, right now the upstairs is here, thereabouts. So we're adding this much space, but yeah, you're right. I mean, I think in terms of putting the office space upstairs, that's the least expensive kind of space that we're going to add. So I think you're 100% right. Putting the ballroom up there starts to have the implication again of like, oh, we should put in a sound system, and we should, you know, and all those things are totally correct to do. There's no doubt about it. But, you know, we should add a balcony out the back. So if you're having a wedding on a summer day, you can open up the doors and go out and look over the creek. All that stuff is true. Opportunity costs. Putting office space up there carries far less opportunity costs. So Denise, you're correct.
This one right here would keep the ballroom pretty much at the same space that they have, and just add a little bit for upstairs and be one of the probably least expensive. None of it is going to be inexpensive, but it would really allow all of that to occur.
I think you're correct.
Okay. Any other comments or thoughts, anyone? And please send your comments on the email, because they are collecting all of those. They'll be bringing them. All of those comments will be brought to council as we move forward. This is not a process that's going to happen quickly. So it's taking time, and it will continue to, you know, we'll take our time as we move forward, but we will want to take all of that to council so that they've heard the comments as they will be providing direction.
And everybody will have opportunities to either join us at the city council when we present our findings to them, and then we'll probably have some sort of, if we can get some sort of consensus, maybe we'll do one where we don't expand. We'll hybridize it into two. We'll have one where we sort of the soup to nuts, and one that's sort of stripped down, and sort of let Denise and the city council decide where to go from there. And it'll all be done in the bright light of day, and everybody will be invited to come to every meeting that we have, so that no one will say that they didn't know we were doing it. So we totally want your input. We'd love for everybody to, I don't know how we do a vote. It's hard to do a vote, but we'd love to hear comments and anything like that. That's how we shape the final design, is through your input. So.
Well, thanks, Jeff, for you and your team,
Yep.
and really appreciate your taking the time to do this both in person and on Zoom. Thanks for everybody that joined. And again, please, you know, encourage people to watch this video and to send emails so that Jeff can collect those and gather that and present that information to council. So thank you.
Thanks to everybody who joined us and tonight, and everybody have a great weekend when it arrives. Okay.
Thanks.
Be well.
Thank you.
Good
everybody.
night.
Good night.